is my privilege to introduce to you Rebecca Rowe from DHCD and Virginia Main Street. Rebecca.
So I also am not certain that I need the microphone. Do I need the microphone?
Yes. We do need the light.
You need the light.
And I need the microphone. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes.
Oh, mercy. That light is right here.
That's the interrogation light.
Is that better? No.
Hold it a little closer.
Is that better?
Yes.
This is a new experience for me. Usually when I'm speaking to people, and you may find this in some of my slides, you know, we're in a rec room. There's folding tables, there's folding chairs. I'm not usually mic'd. So fancy theater, a nice spotlight, microphone, this is a little different for me. So, but thank you so much, Mr. Unruh, for inviting me to come tonight. And of course, I will take any time to come to Clifton Forge. It sounds like my husband and I will be back to see Anna Vidovich, or hear Anna Vidovich play. He's already planning that now that I've seen that she's coming to town. How many of you are familiar with the Main Street program? Most of you. All right. How many of you have heard me or anyone else from Virginia Main Street present on this before? Okay. Fewer hands, but a few people. So what I want to do tonight is talk to you a little bit about the Main Street approach. But mostly what I want to talk about are activities that other Main Street communities around the state are doing within the Main Street approach to implement that program locally. My understanding is that y'all have been meeting for a while and having great conversations and learning a lot and engaging with each other and engaging with your speakers. But maybe there is some interest and momentum around moving into a new phase of your get-togethers that is less about education and engagement and more about implementation and activity. So I just want to show you all some things tonight that are aspirational. I have a couple activities since we're not at tables. We're not going to do it the way that I originally imagined, but I am going to ask you all to speak with me and have a conversation tonight. Please interrupt me with questions at any point so that this is really the information that you need. Ready? All right, and I love saying next slide, next slide, next slide. So the first thing that I want you all to reflect on and throw some words out at me. If you were to complete this sentence, our downtown is
Fair.
fair?
Fair.
Bare.
Yes.
As in
Not much to do.
not much to do
Well, for teenagers.
for teenagers. Fair. Anyone else?
And therefore accessible.
And therefore
Accessible.
accessible. It's not accessible. Is that right?
No, it is.
It is.
You can always find a parking spot.
Plenty of parking. Always a good thing in a downtown. Anyone else?
Quiet.
Quiet. So there's not a lot going on, which makes it quiet and easy to park. This is what I'm hearing.
I also think it's improving.
It's improving.
Yes.
Say more about that.
Well, I'm an old guy. I've been around a long time. I've been in Clifton Forge since 1971. When I came to Clifton Forge, it was vibrant. It was on the end of a long run with the C&O Railroad, which actually caused the primary growth of Clifton Forge.
So back in the 70s, it was more vibrant.
Very vibrant.
More going on. C&O Railroad was a big player.
Yes.
Okay.
And there were other major employers in the area that are no longer vibrant or even exist.
And we're missing major employers now.
Yes.
Can everyone hear him as he's talking, or, okay, so it's helpful for me to repeat? Can't hear him up there. So I'm trying to repeat everything he's saying, so I think you all are getting the message.
But downtown was vibrant in Clifton Forge.
Downtown was vibrant.
And housing was very hard to find in Clifton Forge.
Housing was hard to find?
Very hard to find.
Very hard to find.
I had a friend who already lived here when I moved here. My circumstances weren't that I could come and find a place to live. He called me and said, Eddie, is one available apartment in Clifton Forge that you would live in, and I'm not even sure about it. So I didn't really have a housing choice.
So, long story short, he found an apartment, and I'll bet it was harder to park downtown in the 70s.
It was.
It was, because there
But
was
I will
more
tell
going
you,
on.
it's
Next
not-
slide.
It's not as easy now as it was 10 years ago.
It's not as easy now as it was 10 years ago. That is good to hear, maybe. So, one of the things we want people to think about, I'm sorry, stay in the light, is to think in terms of our downtown is home. It's a reflection of the community. It's the heart of the community. It's an incubator for small businesses. It's where you want to be, hopefully. It's also your highest concentration of tax generation, because if you think about the parking that a strip mall needs or suburban development, there is therefore less business occurring per acre than there is in a downtown district where you have multiple businesses per acre. So we find that downtowns are the highest concentration of tax generation. And they're an advertisement for your quality of life. We just heard that there was a developer in town, and even before they met with the town and took a tour of the properties that they're interested in, they were here, and the town was acting as an advertisement for them, whether or not you knew it. And I promise it's doing that every day, whether or not you know it. Next slide. So one of the things I'd like to talk to folks about before we jump into Main Street is the soul of the community study that the Knight Foundation did. I think they started that study about 10 years ago, and they completed it about 5 years ago. And they surveyed a number of people in a number of communities over the years to look at this thing they call place attachment. And what they discovered is these are the, I think it's 10 things, if I remember correctly, that really draw people and attach people to a community. Can you guess what of these, what are the top 3?
Openness and welcomeness.
Openness and welcomeness. Was such a, were you at the presentation at VML?
No.
She's just very smart. Openness and welcomeness is one of them. Anyone else?
Safety?
Safety? Any other guesses?
Civic involvement.
Civic involvement. Okay. So it is, next slide. Aesthetics, social offerings, and openness and inclusiveness. These are the things that attach people to a community and make them want to stay. And there is, what they found with this study, a direct line between the place attachment that a person has, how they feel about that place, to how much money they spend in that place. And that may feel a little vulgar to talk about the money, but you want people spending money here because this is how we make money, so we can fix the roads and we can hire that other person to work at the water treatment plant and so on, is by having more people spend money here, and then your gross domestic product goes up. So the way people feel about their community directly impacts the way they spend money in that community, directly impacts the budget that your locality has to return services to you. Next slide. So you can see some of the pieces of the soul of the community study by the Knight Foundation reflected in Main Street. The 4-point approach for Main Street, or it's now called the Main Street approach, involves organization, design, economic vitality, and promotion. And I'm not going to read the whole slide to you, but essentially the organization is a sense of ownership. So you have an organization that is implementing the Main Street approach and bringing the resources together, and that organization is the community. The design is the aesthetics piece. Are the facades in good repair? Is the paint peeling? Are there benches to sit on? Can I find my way around town? Are the parking spaces attractive, and can I find those? Do they feel safe? Economic vitality, there are stores downtown, places are open, there are things happening, and then promotion brings the additional sense of activity. Not only are there businesses open, there are people on the streets, there are people coming and going. It's harder to find a parking space because there's so much happening downtown. Next slide. Put even more briefly, promotion builds the buzz for your community. Economic vitality is that strong business component. Design is the heritage, then aesthetics, because Main Street was started by the National Trust for Historic Preservation. And organization is securing the resources. Next slide. So Main Street, again, it started with the National Trust for Historic Preservation, and it reinvigorates your traditional downtown neighborhood or historic commercial district. I'm gonna have to keep doing this. And it's economic development through leveraging your place-based assets. It can be your historic buildings, that can be outdoor recreation tourism. It's different for every community, but most every community that is involved in Main Street has those historic buildings. And this is a grassroots revitalization strategy. So this is a bottoms-up approach. This is not something that the town does for the community. This is not something that the Chamber of Commerce does only for their members. This is something that the community does for itself and as a nonprofit organization. Next slide. And remember, feel free to interrupt me with any questions, and I apologize for turning my back to you on occasion. I guess that's what the microphone is for. So what we're looking for outcomes of a Main Street effort are utilizing those historic buildings and assets, public-private collaboration. So we are working with the town, we are working with the major employers that are not only in Clifton Forge, but are in the region. We're working with the healthcare systems, the school systems, because very little happens anymore without that public-private collaboration. We're preserving and creating jobs, increasing the tax revenue, creating community pride, creating that vibrancy in a place that people want to go back. Regional allure, when someone is visiting Lexington, we want them to say, you know what, we need to take a day to go over to Clifton Forge. And creating a sense of place. So while we want someone who's visiting Lexington to say, hey, let's go spend the day in Clifton Forge, we're not trying to be Lexington, we're not trying to be Covington, we're not trying to be Stanton. We are being the absolute best Clifton Forge that we can be. Yes?
We have a lot of, obviously downtown, I think it doesn't get historic, but unfortunately, there are very few people who own the buildings. They don't have the money to fix them up, and they are refusing to sell them. So it's sort of a stalemate where, okay, we got the buildings, that, you know, but you know, nobody can do anything, no one wants to sell them.
Right.
I don't know what they think they're gonna sit on until, I don't know what they're waiting for. But people just don't.
Can everyone hear this
People don't have
comment?
the money to fix up their buildings, and so on different Facebook posts, I see, you know, where's the new commercial spaces ready? And it's sort of, there's nothing. There's nothing really here because nobody can afford to either buy a play, you know, one of the buildings on Main Street and or fix it up. Mm-hmm. So that's the basic thing.
Yeah.
I think there are people, there's new places opening in Covington almost weekly, for God's sakes. You know, they've got places that are ready to rent and all that kind of stuff. The people who own the buildings here, again, that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, and you know, Lexington, so one thing I tell communities, and this may sound a little strange at first, is none of you are special. Clifton Forge is so far from the only community that has that issue. that we can create all kinds of self-help groups for communities that have those property owners who aren't there, who won't spend the money, they won't fix it up, they're asking rents that are astronomical, the price they want to sell it at is ridiculous for what's going to happen, and economic growth and economic activity can really be held up by those property owners. And the locality has very few tools in their toolbox to work with those property owners. So no community is special, but every community is unique. Everyone shares these same issues, but the approach and the solution is going to be different in each place. So in some places, we have a community, the executive director of the Main Street organization in Wytheville. For 7 years, I think, he just kept talking to the building owners of the theater, the Millwall Theater in Wytheville. Never asking them for anything, just talking. Just letting them know what their Main Street organization was doing. Just creating a relationship with them, creating trust with them. And then one day he asked if he could use a financial feasibility grant from Virginia Main Street to just study the building and see if it could be turned back into a theater and see if the market was there for that. So if you want to use the financial feasibility grant from Virginia Main Street, you don't have to own the building, you don't have to have site control, you don't have to have any of that, you just have to have the permission of the property owner so that the consultant can have access to the building. Once that feasibility study came back, the property owner saw the potential and sold the building to the nonprofit and kind of got out of the way. So that's kind of best case scenario. But we also see in some communities, and we'll take Lexington this time, they have not implemented this yet, but we are looking at some market studies with them as well because they kind of have the opposite problem. They have zero vacancy, but it's because everything is fixed up. So there's nowhere for anyone to go if they want to start a business. What they do have are some parking lots where they are looking at Airstream RVs that potentially the organization would own and fix up, and small businesses could operate out of the Airstreams. So we see that happening in some communities. But I hear you, I validate you, I live in Richmond, and it's a problem in Richmond. It's a problem in pretty much every community in Virginia that I go to, and the main streets across the country. And I don't have a perfect answer. I can only tell you what some other communities are doing.
With respect to that, how familiar are you with the blight taxes that certain localities have proposed and implemented? I know recently there was a bill in front of the House of Representatives in Richmond that was sent to committee and then killed. But for example, Marion, Petersburg, Richmond, I know is looking at it where you are allowed legally as the local government to institute what I would call a very high tax rate on dilapidated, unused, or vacant downtown properties, to the extent of, I think one of the localities is $10 per $100 of value of the building. So I mean, it's a major tax incentive for them to do something with it, but I don't know where that stands in the broader Main Street activities across Virginia, but I know that it's bubbling around in certain areas.
So until legislation would be enacted by the Virginia General Assembly to allow for those taxes more broadly, and this is a tax that localities can levy on vacant and dilapidated buildings. So right now there is legislation that allows cities and certain towns, like it's really spelled out in the legislation.
Clifton Forge is actually listed in the bill.
It is listed.
And they struck it.
Well, yes. So what is available right now is very limited in scope to just certain communities in Virginia. I would love to see that more broadly available, and then all it does is allow the localities to decide if this is something that they want to do. And as a planner, as an economic developer, as a preservationist, as a Main Streeter, if I were then in the position to do that, I would do it. Would I do it at $10 per 100? I'm not sure.
Pretty steep.
I think that's going to be locality by locality, but the trick is to make it hurt. Because honestly, their lack of doing any work on their buildings is hurting the property owners who are investing in their buildings. It's hurting the people who want to open businesses. It's
The whole town.
It's hurting the whole town. I agree. As a state employee and a public servant, I cannot advocate for that. You, however, can be in touch with your represented officials and let them know what you value. You can also be in touch with your members of the Virginia Municipal League and let the Virginia Municipal League know what tools you need locally to fight that kind of blight and have them advocate for it. I wish I could, but I can't. Next slide.
Have they been able to, I was figuring a lot of these people who own this property are, as I understand it, very old, older than me, I guess. And I'm not sure they understand ramifications of holding properties, and they pass to estates and all this other stuff. So, I mean, would you suggest or have localities said, let's get an attorney to have a forum to say, here's the deal with property in Virginia. If you die and you leave it, or property taxes or estate taxes or something, I mean, maybe, I'm not sure these people are afraid of the tax outcome or what's coming. I'm not sure exactly what the bump is that they're not willing to.
They're not thinking about the ramifications, or for every individual building owner, it's different motivations or lack of motivations. I have seen some building owners in this state where it literally is an axe to grind. My grandfather couldn't X, Y, and Z because this town, blah, 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 and we're never going to sell this building and we're never going to develop it. No kidding, there's a building in Ashland. They have said they will let that thing fall down, the family will, before they do anything with it. And that is what will happen. There's another property owner I met in Tazewell. He says he will only sell this building to someone else who will keep it as a florist. There's 3 other florists in a town of like 2,500. There's no market reason for it to be a florist. He's lying to himself. He's never going to sell that building. His wife died last year. This is where he goes every day. That's his motivation for not selling it. It's the thing that he does. Now, in terms of talking to the property owners and really explaining to them, here are the ramifications, the estate ramifications, and then the tax ramifications based on estates. I would say, honestly, that is something that a Main Street organization could and should do rather than the unit of local government. That is something that I would suggest a Main Street organization take on. And I wouldn't do it in a forum. I would do it person by person. Because for Main Street, with it being grassroots, it's really about making those connections and having those building owners come to trust you as a representative of the Main Street organization, whether you're paid staff, you're the executive director, you're a board member, you're a committee member. I think it's that kind of slow and persistent conversation.
And if I can do one more thing, is that the community college doesn't have a dormitory. And I overheard when I was over there the other day that, they have basketball, they have different athletes. A lot of them are on grants, on scholarships and stuff like that. One group, I happened to be talking to somebody and he goes, oh, I have a place in Covington that'll fit 7 or 9 of you. So it's basically, that's where they went, and it's right down the street from here.
Yeah.
So again, it's sort of, we've got either the kids who need places to go, the college that will pay the rent, for God's sakes, but the college can't go buy property and fix them up. So it's not that we don't have any need for anything here. Right.
I want to get in the weeds with you. Let's have a drink after this, because there would be a way for the college to do it. But you're absolutely right. And yeah, we see this everywhere. There is a housing shortage in the state, in the country. And it could be fixed if property owners would get off their properties and do something with them. And so we are also always looking at how can we bring state resources to do that, whether it's CDBG or, how can we help. there's really only so much public dollars can do, and there's not enough of them. So I would love to get into the weeds on that with you, but we're going to keep moving. Where are I? Okay, our downtown needs was the next question I was going to ask, but I feel like I'm hearing some of that already. One other thing that the downtown needs, I'll hear from someone. No, we've already aired our grievances. Next slide.
Ice cream shop.
Oh, God, yes.
A big grocery store.
Every town needs an ice cream shop. Hand way in the back.
Color,
Color.
very proud.
So color can be paint, it can be signage, it can be flowers. There's a lot of way to bring
The
color.
Architectural Review Board refuses to put color, allow color on Main Street.
Anyone from the Architectural Review Board in the room?
Rules.
One person from the ARB. Anyone else? 2 people. I will tell you, 3 people. I was a historic district planner in Texas. I literally left the state to get away from being a historic district planner. I'm also very happy to talk to the Architectural Review Board. There again, this solution is going to be unique to your community, but it is worth taking a look at your design guidelines every once in a while, doing some public engagement and hearing what the community is looking for and determining whether the design guidelines are still appropriate to what the community values and what the community is trying to do. We are going to talk at the end about some grants that are available from Virginia Main Street. I will tell you now that Clifton Forge is what is called an Exploring Main Street community. It used to be a commercial district affiliate. So you do qualify for up to $15,000 in, it's called a CVG, Community Vitality Grant. So if you wanted to hire a consultant to review your design guidelines, do some community engagement, and determine whether or not those guidelines need to be updated, that is something that a Virginia Main Street grant could help you do. But we have a lot of ways we can bring color in that don't get reviewed. Next slide. Oh no, wait, hold on. We want to talk about this for a second. So we need color, we need housing, we need site control over some of these buildings, we need more vitality downtown, we need residents, wayfinding signage, investment. So these were not written to be specific to Clifton Forge, but do most of these resonate with you?
Absolutely.
So again, not special, because this is everywhere. Everyone wants these things in their downtown and in their community. Next slide. Are you with the press?
Yes.
You're with the press? Is the quote tomorrow going to be, Rebecca said Clifton Forge isn't special?
It's going to be whatever Rebecca says.
Hey. That is not the quote, because that is not the message. So one of the ways that Main Street is implemented now, we'll just talk about this briefly. So we have the 4 points of the Main Street approach, and then we, Virginia Main Street and National Main Street, works with the communities to take a look at their assets and their market, and again, getting some of the community vision. What does the community want to see? And then we help them find these transformation strategies that really fits their market niche. So I know in Clifton Forge, some things that have been talked about before is you have quite an arts community here. Visual arts, performing arts, arts and crafts, a lot happening there. And then you also have the outdoor recreation components. So those would be 2 things that we could really look at. What are some activities very specific to those market positions that the Main Street organization could undertake to move the needle on those sectors here? And you know, I'm talking a lot about Main Street organizations, but the fact is, whether or not you are involved in Clifton Forge Main Street, you can make the decision as this group of people or individuals to take on some of these activities in the next couple of months. So I want to talk about some of the activities that we see happening in other communities. Next slide. Next slide. Okay, so organization, remember most Main Streets are nonprofits, and if you are going to undertake activities, having the organization come together and create a work plan, have a business plan, have a fundraising plan, and really get the resources together to be able to do the work that the organization and the community want to do takes this kind of effort. Volunteers, communications, consensus building, leadership, financial stewardship, because again, you need those resources to do the work. So this is what your organization committee does. Next slide. In Harrisonburg, boy, that yellow really doesn't work on that slide, does it? So I am going to get a copy of these slides to Gail, and she can make sure that everyone has access to this. In Harrisonburg, they were doing a downtown master plan, and it is very difficult to do broad community engagement when you are doing a master plan. So one of the things that they did was they created these coasters that went in all of the restaurants in the city, not just downtown, but in all of the restaurants. So you could scan the QR code, and while you're sitting there in the restaurant, you could go fill out a survey and tell them what you think about town. You could also just write some things right there on the coaster, and then they had little drop boxes where you could leave it. They would come pick them up and capture those ideas. Next slide. In Danville, they do See the Possible tours. I'm not sure if they do them every year, but they do them as often as resources allow. They will take their staff and their board and some city staff as well, and they will go to a community of similar size that has similar issues and similar opportunities, meet with their counterparts in those cities and see what they're doing. Because a lot of times, you know, you may drive through a city like Stanton and think, wow, this place looks great. They don't have any problems. But when you sit down with their Main Street board, when you sit down with their economic development department and you hear all of the things that they had to do to get it to that place, you start to see what it takes to make that happen in your community. Yes?
Is this in Danville?
Yes, this is Danville.
Okay, so they just have a casino, they're just going to be making $1 zillion in Danville, right? I mean,
that remains to be seen.
well, I mean, I got the numbers off the news. They were made, you know, like $3 million a month or something like that. Nuts, you know, before they even did.
Their Main Street organization is not a city office.
No, I understand that, but I'm saying, you know, their development is going to be based around that casino.
Which is not downtown.
Okay.
Not what?
It's not, I'm saying, the casino is not downtown in Danville. So yeah, the city is going to be getting some new revenue from the casino, that is a certainty. But it is still the Main Street organization's job to make sure that the downtown is healthy so that when people come and they're at the casino, are they just staying at the casino or are they coming downtown? So there's still things for the Main Street organization to be working on. Next slide. In Farmville, so this one is kind of a mix of organization and promotion. What they do, these are their board members, and one year they did a board promotion that every board member said why they were involved in the Farmville Downtown Partnership. Then they posted their why statement along with a picture of them on their social media to promote, here are our board members, if you see them in the community, say hello, this is why they're working with the organization. And then the next year you see these smiling folks with the signs in their hand, that is their one word. So they were all asked to have one word about why downtown is important to them, and then they had a social media campaign around that as well. So knowing who was on their board, making sure they were engaged, and then pushing that out to the community to promote the work that they were doing.